Once upon a time, in a realm where the sapphire tides of the Atlantic met the shimmering horizon of a forgotten age, there existed a world of wonder hidden beneath the foam. This was the kingdom of Thalassa, a sprawling masterpiece of nature and magic, where the towers were forged from iridescent conch shells, and the garden paths were paved with the crushed pearls of ancient oysters. Here, the water was so clear that the fish seemed to fly through liquid light, and the bioluminescent anemones pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeat of the moon. At the center of this underwater paradise lived Princess Lyra, the youngest of 6 royal sisters. Lyra was a creature of ethereal grace, possessing a voice that was said to be the very soul of the ocean. When she sang, the raging currents would soften into a lullaby, and the great blue whales would pause their 1,000-mile migrations just to catch a single note of her melody. Yet despite the splendor of her father's court and the love of her sisters, Lyra was a dreamer whose eyes were always turned toward the surface. She spent her days in the graveyard of ships, a hauntingly beautiful collection of sunken galleons reclaimed by the sea. To her sisters, these were mere ruins, but to Lyra, they were treasures. She would brush the kelp from rotted wooden masts and touch the rusted anchors, whispering to herself about the Star Walkers, the mysterious humans who lived in a world of fire, sun, and wind. Her grandmother, the venerable matriarch of the abyss, would often sit with her on a throne of polished driftwood, warning her of the dangers above. "Humans are like bubbles, Lyra," she would say, her scales silver with the wisdom of centuries. "They are bright and beautiful for a fleeting second, and then they pop, lost to the air forever. We are the tide. We endure for hundreds of years." Content yourself with the cool shadows of the deep, for the sun is a fire that consumes all it touches. But Lyra's heart was not built for contentment. It was built for longing. She wanted to know the scent of a rose, the heat of a hearth, and the thrill of a world that didn't move in slow, liquid circles. She waited with an aching patience for her 15th birthday, the sacred day when every Thalassan royal was permitted to break the surface and see the world of air for the first time. When that day finally arrived, the ocean was as still as a mirror. Lyra rose through the layers of the sea, passing through the twilight zones where the strange, glowing creatures of the deep bid her farewell, until she burst through the surface into the cool night air. The sky was a vast, velvet curtain pinned with 1,000,000 diamond stars, the whispers of the mountains she had heard of in legends. And there, cutting through the silver waves, was a magnificent ship, its sails white as a cloud, and its decks lit with golden lanterns. It was a royal vessel, and at the center of the festivities stood Prince Alaric. He was a man with hair the color of midnight and eyes that reflected the very stars Lyra had longed to see. He laughed with a warmth that seemed to defy the chill of the evening, and as Lyra watched him from the shadows of the waves, she felt a tether snap within her soul. She was no longer a princess of the sea. She was a girl bound to a man she did not know. For hours she lingered in the foam, watching the Star Walkers dance and sing, until the atmosphere suddenly shifted. The great Mother Sea, unpredictable and fierce, decided that the ship belonged to the deep. The clouds bruised into a violent violet, and the wind began to howl like a caged beast. Lightning splintered the sky, striking the mainmast, and in a terrifying instant, the ship was swallowed by the churning maw of the storm. Lyra watched in horror as Alaric was thrown into the freezing darkness. Knowing that humans could not breathe her world, she dove. She fought against the crushing weight of the waves and the jagged debris of the wreck, guided only by the fading light of the prince's white tunic. She found him deep beneath the surface, his eyes closed, his life slipping away in a trail of tiny bubbles. She grabbed him, her powerful emerald tail propelling them upward with a strength born of pure desperation. She held his head above the water, sheltering him from the gale, and sang to him a song of life, a song of the deep, praying that the magic in her voice would reach across the threshold of death. When the first light of dawn turned the sky to a soft peach, she carried his unconscious form to a beach near a quiet monastery. She sat by him for a long time, stroking his wet hair and memorizing the lines of his face, her heart breaking with a love that felt like a spear. When the sound of a monastery bell echoed across the sand, she retreated into the waves, watching from behind a rock as a young novice found him. Alaric opened his eyes, saw the girl from the temple, and smiled, believing she was the angel who had pulled him from the abyss. Lyra felt the first true salt of her life, not the salt of the sea, but the salt of a tear. The weeks that followed were a silent agony. Lyra returned to the coral palaces of Thalassa, but she was a ghost in her own home. She refused to sing, and the vibrant gardens of the palace seemed to fade into gray without the light of her spirit. Driven by a sorrow that could not be quenched, she made a choice that terrified even the bravest of the sea folk. She swam down into the forbidden trench of shadows, a place where the water grew thick and foul, and the skeletons of krakens formed a gateway to the lair of Sycorax, the sea witch. Sycorax was a figure of dark, undulating majesty, half woman and half behemoth, with eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. "I knew you would come, little star," the witch hissed, her voice sounding like the grinding of tectonic plates. "You want to leave the cool embrace of the water for the burning dust of the land. I can give you what you seek, but the price will be etched into your very marrow." Sycorax explained the bargain with a cruel, knowing smile. She would brew a potion that would split Lyra's tail into two slender legs, but the transformation would be an explosion of pain, and every step she took on land would feel as if she were walking on the sharpest shards of glass.
"You will dance for him," Sycorax cackled, "and the world will marvel at your grace, for you will move like the wind itself. But you will bleed in silence, for I require your voice as my payment. You will be a mute foundling, unable to speak the truth of who you are. And mark my words, the human heart is a fickle thing. If Alaric marries another, your heart will shatter at the first light of dawn, and you will dissolve into sea foam, lost to the cosmic tides forever, with no soul to carry you to the heavens." Lyra looked at the witch, then at the glowing orb of her own voice that Sycorax held out her hand for. She thought of Alaric's laugh and the way the stars had looked from the surface. Without a word, she reached into her throat, pulled out the pulsing blue light of her song, and handed it to the witch. She took the vial of obsidian liquid and swam toward the shore. The transformation was a symphony of agony as she drank the potion on the white sands of the beach. It felt as if a white-hot iron were being driven through her spine. She collapsed into the surf, her tail tearing apart, her lungs screaming at the harshness of the oxygen. When Alaric found her at sunrise, he saw a girl of impossible beauty, with eyes that held the depth of the ocean, but a silence that was profound. He was captivated by her, this mysterious wanderer who seemed to have dropped from the sky. He brought her to his castle, dressed her in the finest silks, and called her his silent muse. For months, Lyra lived in a world of gold and roses, a world of fire and stone. She loved Alaric with a devotion that transcended words. She walked beside him through the high mountain passes, every step a trial of fire. She danced for him at the royal balls, moving with an ethereal, haunting grace that left the court in awe. They did not see the crimson stains on the floor. They only saw a girl who moved as if gravity were a suggestion. Alaric grew fond of her, treating her with a tenderness that gave her hope, but his heart was a prisoner to a ghost. "I must find the maiden from the temple," he told Lyra as they sat by the hearth one evening. "She is the one who saved me, the one whose voice gave me back my life. Without her, I am only half a man." Lyra reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched his arm, her eyes screaming the truth. "It was me. I was the one who held you. I was the one who sang to you." But her voice remained trapped in a shell in the dark trench, and Alaric only sighed, seeing her as a cherished, broken sister. Then the world turned cold. A diplomatic marriage was announced to seal a peace between kingdoms. The bride was none other than Gwendolen, the novice from the monastery who had found Alaric on the sand. When the prince saw her, he fell to his knees, convinced that fate had finally returned his savior. Gwendolen, though kind, accepted the praise, for she too had been enchanted by the prince's handsome face that morning. The wedding was to be a grand affair, held on a massive golden barge that would sail far out into the open sea. Lyra was tasked with being the maid of honor, her heart breaking with every silk ribbon she tied and every pearl she pinned into Gwendolen's hair. She felt the magic of the witch beginning to fail. Her skin grew translucent, and the salt of the sea seemed to call to her bones. The night of the wedding was a spectacle of lanterns and music that echoed across the dark waves. Alaric and Gwendolen danced under the stars, their laughter a jagged blade in Lyra's chest. She knew that as the first ray of sun touched the horizon, her time would end. As the moon reached its zenith and the ship sailed into the deep, dark waters of the Atlantic, 5 figures rose from the foam. It was Lyra's sisters, but they were unrecognizable. Their long, glorious hair had been shorn to the scalp, and their faces were etched with a desperate, hollow grief. "Lyra!" the eldest cried, her voice a ragged whisper against the wind. "We have seen the witch. We gave her our hair, our beauty, every treasure we possessed to buy you a second chance. She gave us this." She reached up and handed Lyra a dagger made of jagged black coral, pulsing with a dark, rhythmic magic. "Before the sun rises, you must plunge this into Alaric's heart. When his warm blood touches your feet, the spell will break. Your tail will return, your voice will find you, and you will be a princess of the sea once more. You can come home, Lyra. You can live." Lyra took the dagger, its weight feeling like a mountain in her hands. She crept into the royal cabin where Alaric and Gwendolen lay asleep, their hands entwined in a promise of a future she would never see. She stood over him, the black coral blade glinting in the pale moonlight. One thrust and the pain would end. One thrust and she could go back to the cool, quiet halls of Thalassa, to the songs of the whales and the love of her father. She looked at Alaric, the man who had been her sun and her stars. He stirred in his sleep, a soft smile touching his lips as he murmured Gwendolen's name. In that moment, Lyra realized a truth that the sprite who forged the wicked mirror could never understand. True love was not about being remembered. It was not about possession or even being loved in return. It was about the light in the other person's eyes. It was about their happiness, even if you were only a shadow in the background of their story. She could not do it. She could not extinguish the light she had fought so hard to save. With a cry that was only a gust of wind, she ran to the deck and hurled the dagger far into the sea. Where it sank, the water turned a deep, glowing crimson. The sky was beginning to pale, a sliver of gold appearing on the horizon. Lyra felt her body beginning to blur. Her legs turned to silver mist, and her fingers began to dissolve into white, effervescent bubbles. She cast one last, lingering look at the ship, a smile of peace on her lips, and threw herself into the waves. But the darkness of the abyss did not claim her. Instead of the cold, unfeeling void of the sea foam, Lyra felt herself being lifted by a warmth that was brighter than the sun. She found herself floating in the air, surrounded by hundreds of ethereal beings made of light and dawn. "Who are you?" she asked, and to her shock, her voice returned, not as a mermaid's song, but as a celestial melody that resonated through the heavens. "We are the daughters of the air," they sang in a voice like bells. A mermaid is born without a soul, but through her own deeds, through a love that is selfless and a heart that chooses light over darkness, she can create one. By choosing Alaric's life over your own, you have earned your spirit. You are no longer bound to the tides or the dust. Lyra looked down and saw the ship sailing toward the morning sun. She saw Alaric wake and run to the deck, looking for his silent muse, his eyes filled with a sudden, unexplainable grief as he saw the foam dancing on the water. He didn't know where she had gone, but in his heart, he felt a warmth he had never felt before, as if a breeze were whispering a secret of gratitude in his ear. Lyra smiled, a spirit of the wind at last. She wasn't a girl of the shore or a princess of the abyss. She was a part of the dawn. She would fly over the world, bringing cool breezes to the weary and light to those lost in the dark. As she soared toward the rising sun, she began to sing, and for the first time in history, the whole world, from the highest mountain to the deepest trench, stopped to listen to the song of a soul that had been won by love. And they lived in the way that legends do, forever.